To atheists, this question on whether to fight over the attributes of the only God is absurd. They would be thinking, why fight over the attributes of something that doesn't really exist? But the point is whether God exists or not is in a way irrelevant to people who want to believe in him, because those who want to believe in him will want to believe in him and want to believe in him in a particular way. So those who want to believe in God would logically and necessarily have to believe that he is logical in existence and perfectly moral. Otherwise, why would you worship the opposite? What would be the point of worshipping, for example, an executed blasphemer? The whole point of worshipping a deity is that you acknowledge your own status, your own inferiority, the fact that you worship a being that is immortal is because you are mortal. You worship something that is infallible because you know you are fallible, and all the rest of it. So it would make no sense, for example, to worship something weaker than you are, such as an adult worshipping a baby. Because the logic of the desire to worship something is to, it's basically to seek protection from someone stronger than yourself, to make you feel safe and good and feel that everything will be all right, even when things look very scary indeed. So over the centuries, there have been such historical tragedies, I suppose you could call it, like the Albigensian Crusade. And it's basically the Catholic Church being mean to other people who know themselves to be Christians for believing in God in a different way. So these times of strife when I don't know how many people were killed in the Albigensian Crusade, but it was quite a few of them, and obviously the pity of it is most people haven't heard of it, and nobody cares, and they would just be lumped together. The casualties would be lumped together under wars of people killing themselves over religion. But then people kill themselves over politics. So what's the difference? Now, a new term is coming back into fashion, which is political theology, which is an idea of Carl Schmitt, who was trying, well, he's a German jurist who did help Hitler suspend the constitution and some other things, but his ideas are still relevant, and the Chinese still use his ideas to explain their constitution to themselves. So I will ask how many people died in the Albigensian Crusade in the 1200s, just to punish myself for not remembering it. According to Wikipedia, at least 200,000 to as many as 1,000 million Cathars were killed. It is this conflict which made the Catholic Church target the Catholic religious movement in southern France is considered by some scholars to be an act of genocide. The crusade was marked by significant violence, including the infamous massacre at Béziers, when estimated 20,000 people were killed, according to Wikipedia. The high casualty figures stem from the widespread violence against both Cathars and the general population, as well as the length and intensity of the conflict. The brutality of the Albigensian Crusade led to it being described as the bloodiest crusade in history. Some scholars even consider it to be the first genocide in Europe. And this is basically white Christian people doing it to each other. Who were the Cathars who were the victims of this crusade? They were anti-materialist reform movement within the Bogomil churches of the Balkans, calling for what they saw as a return to the Christian message of perfection, poverty, and preaching, combined with a rejection of the physical. The reforms were a reaction against the often perceived scandalous and dissolute lifestyles of the Catholic clergy. Their theology, Gnostic in many ways, was basically dualist. Okay, I think that people will find it difficult to understand. Well, Gnosticism is basically a different kind of mumbo jumbo from the Catholic Church. Dualist means, well, actually, I'm not sure what it means. You look it up in the Wikipedia entry on the Albigensian Crusade. Several of their practices, especially their belief in the inherent evil of the physical world, conflicted with the doctrines of the incarnation of Christ and Catholic sacraments. This led to accusations of Gnosticism and attracted the eye of the Catholic establishment. So, yes, and then of course, the Catholic Church came down on them like a ton of bricks. And killed as many as 1 million Christian Europeans who had a slightly different idea of the Catholic doctrine of the Trinity. Now, okay, there's more information now. The word "kathar" is derived from the Greek word katharos, meaning clean or pure, partially derived from the early forms of Gnosticism. The theology of the Cathars was dualistic, a belief in two equal and comparable transcendent principles: God, the force of good, and the demiurge, the force of evil. Cathars held that the physical world was evil and created by this demiurge, which they called Rex Mundi. Rex Mundi encompassed all that was corporeal, chaotic, and powerful. The Cathar understanding of God was entirely disincarnate. They viewed God as a being or principle of pure spirit, completely unsullied by the taint of matter. He was a God of love, order, and peace. Jesus was an angel and only a phantom body, and the accounts of him in the New Testament were to be understood allegorically. According to the Cathar teaching, humans originally had no souls. They taught that the evil god or Satan, another version, either gave new souls to people or used the souls of fallen angels. Alternatively, God took pity on men and gave them souls. So, okay, I'll carry on reading it because just to give you an idea of the chaos of Catharism. Some Cathars believed in the transmigration of souls, in which the soul went from one body to another. Whether they did so or not, sexual intercourse under all circumstances was a grave sin, because it either brought a new soul into the evil world or perpetuated the cycle of souls being trapped in evil bodies. Civil authority had no claim on a Cathar, since this was the rule of the physical world. Accordingly, the Cathars refused to take oaths of allegiance or volunteer for military service. Cathar doctrine opposed killing animals and consuming meat. So now we get to the bottom of things. The whole point of Christianity was to defend the divine right of kings, and obviously kings need their armies, and if the monarch subjects decided not to join military service, there's going to be trouble, and this was really the real reason why they were killed, as an example to others. I mean, you can think it was something else about, their wrong think, or, thinking of the devil as equally powerful to God and that kind of thing. But it's really their refusal to join the army that meant their death sentence, not their, esoteric beliefs. So we have to understand what Christianity was supposed to do. Obviously, the king, couldn't have most of his subjects saying, "We don't want to fight your silly imperial wars." That wouldn't do at all. And I guess the Catholic Church said, "Leave it to us. We'll sort these heretics out, and make them very sorry indeed." So that is basically the role of Christianity. So when these historically ignorant white nationalists want to go back to it, they really have to understand how it worked when it was working, and how terrible it must be for their ancestors who were basically forced into believing these things. White people should be particularly careful because, whatever you think of other civilizations, nobody else was forced to believe in the nonsense of Christianity in the same way that European subjects of Christian monarchs had to pretend to believe in the kind of semi-divine nature of their king. And it is no surprise that eventually they rebelled and mostly now live in republics. So why is it important? Obviously, it is important even when you're talking about the same being. If you're talking about the only God in the universe, his attributes can become a very political subject, because if you think he's not a living God, then you're going to treat him a different way. If you don't think he's a moral God, then you will be not trusting in him. If you don't think he's all powerful, you'll be looking for more powerful alternatives. So another example, other than the Albigensian Crusade, is the excommunication of Spinoza. Spinoza was a Jew who decided to assimilate in Amsterdam, and he wrote a book talking about God, but not the Abrahamic God who gave the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, but the God who is the universe and is therefore material. And as a result, because he denied the nature of God that Jews were supposed to believe in, they excommunicated him. And therefore, we have to work out whether it was justified. And I'm actually saying it is, just because if you have the wrong idea about the attributes of a thing, then your attitude towards it is going to be markedly different. So yeah, it could be mum and dad. If you think of them as loving parents, you're going to be a loving and grateful child, and you will help your parents and support them, and behave well. But if you think mum and dad are criminals and bad people, you're going to think of them and treat them in a totally different way. So of course it matters now that we have begun to analyze it. So ultimately, it's important because we're supposed to trust in God. I mean, look at the dollar bill. In God we trust. So obviously, the American government wanted American citizens to trust in God and trust in their government and trust in their banking system, and not in order to not to cause runs on the bank, withdrawing all their money all at the same time, and so that's what we need in order for life to carry on. We need to think that tomorrow will be much the same as today, or even better. To carrying on, that we do our work, we keep our promises, we carry on providing the services that we're capable of providing to other people, and life carries on much as before. But if we all got it into our heads that the Messiah is coming tomorrow and the world will end, then I guess nothing will get done today, will it? All the shops would close. What would people do? Will they start looting shops? I guess it depends on whether you really believe that the Messiah is coming or not. So all kinds of beliefs would have an effect on our behavior, because our behavior is based on our beliefs. We may believe we have no alternative but to commit a crime or go down a certain road, or we don't know, but it all is based on what we believe would happen if we took a particular course of action. Now, I keep focusing on this issue because Vincent Bruno has a problem with the Abrahamic God. I think he said yesterday that he would read the Quran, which is good news. And he does say he finds it alarming to be threatened with hell by the Quran. And he finds that upsetting. But then the thing is, when I read the Quran, I just dismissed it because I didn't believe in God. So therefore, the threats didn't particularly. Okay, if you're atheist and you don't believe, if you're atheist and you thought a human or humans wrote the Quran, you're not going to take it so seriously that you're going to be frightened by threats of being sent to hell by God. You just wouldn't be. So I suppose Vincent already half believes, because he's Jehovah's Witness, and even though he is pushing against it, he fundamentally bears the scars of his childhood. And also, I think he probably wants to believe, and he's a little confused about whether to believe or not. And then we were also discussing yesterday about positive thinking and optimism. And I'm saying, well, I didn't actually manage to say then, but I'll say it now. Belief in the Abrahamic God and the afterlife, and that good will be rewarded and evil punished in this life or the next, is undeniably a positive and a belief that is based on optimism. Why would you believe that something you have never met would just sort everything out and give justice to all and reward all the good that needs to be rewarded and punish all the evil that needs to be punished? So it would appear that we believe because we want to believe, and for those who are philosophically inclined, they might argue that such a being, such an omnipotent and perfectly moral being, cannot have his existence disproved. Therefore, it is not illogical to believe in him. And also, there are all these people who do already believe in him. And you just have to add the people who are supposed to be Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists to get to the figure of around 6 billion. And the total world population is 8 billion. So you would have to concede that more than half the people in the world believe in the afterlife or claim to believe in the afterlife. So you would be in the majority. So this is, whether they really believe or not, who knows? They could all be hypocrites. But the point is, if they are hypocrites, it means they are capable of being shamed. Hypocrites are cowards and liars who come up with clever excuses not to do what they're supposed to do. So they will obviously bend with the wind, and if you blow at them hard enough, they might bend in the way that you want. So even their hypocrisy is useful. They're only lying because they're scared. But if you reassure them and tell them that they're telling the truth and exercising logic would be better than telling lies and talking nonsense, you might actually get them to do the right thing. So this is one of my reasons for optimism. I mean, fundamentally, all political activists are optimists. Because why would you bother arguing with anybody about politics if you're of a pessimistic frame of mind? You would think, well, you can argue about politics all you want, but fundamentally, nothing changes. People will still want to believe what they want to believe, and you will have got no further. You might have even alienated people with your views and advice that no one asked, and you might cause yourself to be cancelled. But anyway, people do these things probably because they can't help themselves. They feel in some way compelled to just go on and on and on about the same thing over and over and over again because it's on their mind and they can't stop thinking about it and talking about it. And I do think of all the people who got themselves burnt at the stake. They must have known what would happen to them. But I suppose they carried on regardless because they thought that they would meet God sooner and satisfy their curiosity sooner than hanging around in this world, wondering which way to bend and where the wind is blowing. They might have just decided, well, when I die, I'll know what the answer is. Because the presumption is that, well, God will tell them, or they would know, if they, when they met God, or whether, what they did was the right thing or not. And of course, Christians who meet God and discover he's not Jesus will know that they will be going to hell. But I don't know if I've explained sufficiently what I mean about the logic of believing in the most powerful God conceivable. Because, fundamentally, if you want to worship any God, you would have to logically and necessarily worship the most powerful one, and that would be the Abrahamic God. The downside of worshipping the Abrahamic God is that he has all these rules. But then worshipping a God without any rules is worshipping an inferior being. Um, because the story is obviously, the Jews saying, well, God, having created the universe and humanity, has made laws to protect humanity from each other. And that's the point of them. And it would appear to be true that the most powerful human groups believed in the most powerful deity who has taken the trouble to send messages to humanity. So why would you believe in any other kind of God, like the God of Spinoza? For Spinoza, the reason is quite simple. He didn't want to live as a Jew, so he wanted, so he got himself expelled from his Jewish community. As for the Cathars, I suppose they got fed up with fighting the French king's wars. And probably they were reasonably certain of the correctness of their beliefs. And they were certainly prepared to take a risk in going to the other place. I mean, if people really believed in God, then they would be prepared to martyr themselves over their cause. That's what I'm trying to say. So Jews are supposed to martyr themselves when they are asked to bow before an idol, commit adultery or murder, but everything else that they're permitted to do, such as eat pork and commit other minor crimes at the behest of anti-Semites who want to torture them or force them into converting to another religion. So we had the Inquisition to convert Jews to Christianity. And I suppose what would happen to Jews who did get frightened enough to pretend to become Christian is they in the end created more trouble for themselves. If you look at the matter from a long-term perspective, because obviously if you convert to Christianity knowing it to be idolatry, you will be creating the potential for lots of idolatrous descendants after having children brought up in idolatry, and they will be being a trouble to themselves and others with the evil that they promote. So back to Vincent being unable to accept that God is, that the sensible approach to viewing God would be, conceiving of God would be that he is morally perfect. He's saying there's no proof, but I'm saying if you're going to worship a deity, you would worship the most powerful being conceivable, because it just wouldn't make sense to worship anything that's powerful. And Vincent's position is that he has to be a polytheist, and it must be there must be at least three gods to make his system viable. But then having three gods would make Occam's razor the problem for making up a story. Why three? Who are the other two? Is there Mr. and Mrs. God and Baby God? And then you'd have to make up a story, and people will accuse you of making up stories. So this is really the fundamental problem of Vincent selling his idea of polytheism. He needs at least three, because he thinks two would be, I must ask him again, but he's saying two would be too predictable, and there needs to be a kind of group dynamics of two or three. But I hope I've managed to convey in some way that our conception of an individual, it doesn't have to be God, will affect our attitude towards that individual. So we might think that the person is benign, and of course we're going to be, trusting and generous to the benign person. But if we think they're malign, we would avoid them and distrust them and maybe even hurt them. So we have to have the correct conception of God in order to make this moral system work for us. And once we agree that optimism is a survival strategy, then it would become logical to believe that the most powerful being conceivable does in fact exist and would help us if we were good and did what he commanded.